I started working at Mercer Auto just after my 23rd birthday, mostly because I was desperate. Not dramatic movie level desperate. Just regular adult desperate. Rent overdue. Student loans breathing down my neck. My old warehouse job cutting hours until I was basically surviving on instant noodles and denial. So when Mercer Auto called me back after my interview, I said yes before the manager even finished explaining the pay. That's how I met Maxwell. The garage sat on the edge of town between a tire shop and a faded diner nobody under 50 willingly ate at. The place smelled permanently like motor oil, hot metal, and burnt coffee. The kind of smell that sticks to your clothes even after a shower. Maxwell practically lived there. The first thing I noticed about him wasn't that he was attractive, even though he absolutely was. It was how focused he looked. Like everything around him moved too slowly for his brain. He barely looked up when the manager introduced us. "This is Dean," Rick said loudly over the sound of an impact wrench. "New guy." Maxwell wiped grease off his hands with a rag and gave me one quick glance. "Great," he muttered. "Another rookie." Then he walked away. I remember standing there thinking, wow. Okay. Good start. "Don't take it personally," Rick told me. "Maxwell hates everybody equally." That turned out to be only half true. For the first week, Maxwell barely tolerated me. He corrected everything I did in this clipped, irritated voice that made me feel like an idiot even when I wasn't doing anything wrong. "You're holding the flashlight wrong. You missed a bolt. That's not where the socket goes." At one point I finally snapped. "You know, you could just say good morning like a normal person." He looked at me from under the hood of a Ford truck. "You want friendliness or you want to learn? Both would be amazing." That almost made him smile. Almost. The weird thing was, even when he acted annoyed, he never actually left me alone. If another mechanic tried pulling me onto a different job, Maxwell would suddenly appear out of nowhere. "He's helping me." Every time. At first I thought he just didn't trust anyone else to train me properly. Then the customers started noticing me. Mostly because I was new. People always stare at the new guy in places like that. Especially when the new guy doesn't look like he belongs under a truck all day. One woman in her 40s kept finding excuses to come back to the front desk while I worked. "You're Dean, right?" "Yeah." "You're very polite." "That's rare here." Behind me, I heard metal clang violently. I turned around. Maxwell was glaring at us from across the garage. The woman laughed quietly. "I think your coworker hates me." "He hates everybody," I said. But Maxwell didn't look irritated. He looked angry. Later that afternoon, he cornered me near the tool cabinets. "You flirting with customers now?" I blinked at him. "What?" "The blonde lady." She asked where the waiting room was. "You smiled too much." I stared at him for a full second before laughing. "You cannot be serious." "I'm serious about customers wasting time while we're behind schedule." But his jaw was tight in a way that had nothing to do with schedules. That was the first moment I realized something about Maxwell Mercer. He watched me constantly. Not casually. Constantly. And once I noticed it, I couldn't stop noticing it. Every time I talked to someone too long, his head turned. Every time a customer laughed at something I said, Maxwell suddenly found a reason to walk over. Every single time. It got worse after about a month. By then, we'd fallen into a routine that felt strangely natural. I started understanding his moods before he even spoke. I knew when he was stressed by the way he organized tools too precisely. I knew he skipped lunch whenever he was irritated. I knew he secretly liked terrible gas station coffee even though he complained about it constantly. And somehow, without either of us discussing it, we became attached at the hip. "Where's Maxwell?" I asked one morning while clocking in. Rick looked at me over his clipboard. "You ask about him every day like you're his wife." From under a car nearby, Maxwell's voice appeared instantly. "Shut up, Rick." I bit back a smile. That became dangerous too. Because Maxwell noticed every smile. One afternoon, a guy around our age came in with a modified Mustang and immediately latched onto me. "Man, finally someone normal works here," he joked while I checked him in. "No offense to the murderers in the garage." I laughed. Behind me, I heard Maxwell slam a drawer shut so hard the entire counter shook. The customer glanced past me. Did I say something wrong?" "No," I said slowly. But Maxwell was already walking toward us. "What's the issue with the car?" he asked sharply. The guy looked confused. "Transmission, maybe? I'll handle it." The customer blinked. "Oh. Okay." Maxwell grabbed the keys directly out of my hand. Not aggressively. Worse. Possessively. When the customer disappeared into the waiting area, I followed Maxwell into the garage. "What was that?" "What was what?" "You just stole my customer. He's annoying. You don't even know him." Maxwell slid under the Mustang without looking at me. "I know enough." I crossed my arms. "You're acting weird lately." That got his attention. He rolled himself back out from under the car and sat up slowly. "Define weird." "You keep acting like every customer talking to me is a personal attack." His expression changed for half a second. Tiny. But real. Then he looked away. "You talk too much," he muttered. "That's not an answer." "Maybe I just don't like distractions." I should have dropped it. Instead, I asked quietly. "Or maybe you don't like sharing attention." The garage suddenly felt very still. Maxwell stared at me in complete silence. And for the first time since I met him, he looked nervous. Not angry. Not annoyed. Nervous. Then Rick yelled from across the shop, completely ruining whatever that moment was. "Maxwell! Stop staring at Dean and fix the damn car!" The entire garage burst into laughter. Maxwell immediately rolled back under the Mustang. But not before I saw his ears turn red. And that was the exact moment I realized I was in serious trouble. The problem with realizing someone is jealous of you is that suddenly everything starts looking suspicious. Especially when that someone spends 10 hours a day 5 feet away from you. After Rick's comment, the entire garage became unbearable for me. Not because anyone else cared. Because Maxwell cared too much. I started catching him staring when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not in a subtle way either. He just stopped what he was doing and looked at me like he was trying to solve a problem he hated having. And every single time I noticed, he'd immediately find something else to focus on. A wrench. An engine. Literally the wall. It should have been funny. Instead, it made my stomach do weird things. A week later, things escalated. I was helping at the front counter because Cheryl had gone on lunch break when a customer walked in, a guy maybe a few years older than us, tall, confident, clearly the kind of person who enjoyed hearing himself talk. He smiled at me immediately. "You Dean?" "Yeah. Guy on the phone said you'd help me." I nodded and grabbed the clipboard. "What's going on with the car?" "Honestly," he said, leaning against the counter, "no idea. But if you're the one fixing it, I suddenly feel optimistic." I laughed automatically. Bad decision. Because behind me, I heard Maxwell's voice. "Cold. I'll take this one." The guy glanced past me. "Oh. Sure." I turned around slowly. Maxwell was standing there holding a diagnostic tablet like he marched over specifically to interrupt us. "You're busy with the Civic," I reminded him. "Not anymore." "You literally are." I said I'll take this one. The customer looked between us like he'd accidentally walked into a divorce. I crossed my arms. "Maxwell." "What? Why are you doing this?" His eyes locked onto mine for one sharp second. Then he grabbed the clipboard out of my hands and walked away. The customer blinked. "Did I just get stolen?" "Apparently," I muttered. The guy laughed. "Your coworker hates me. Join the club." But Maxwell didn't hate him. That was becoming very obvious. He hated anyone who took my attention away from him. Later that afternoon, I found him outside behind the garage during break, smoking even though I'd only ever seen him smoke when he was stressed. You know those things kill you, right? He glanced at me. You here to give me a health lecture? I'm here because you're acting insane. That made him scoff quietly. I'm acting insane? Yes. Interesting. You keep stealing customers from me like a jealous boyfriend. The second the words left my mouth, silence crashed between us. Maxwell froze. Actually froze. The cigarette paused halfway to his mouth. And for the first time since I met him, I genuinely caught him off guard. You done? He asked finally, voice lower now. No. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. What is your problem lately? His jaw tightened. You really want to know? Yes. He looked at me for a long moment, eyes sharp and unreadable. Then he said quietly, I don't like the way they look at you. My heart immediately started pounding. What? The customers, he said. The guys especially. I stared at him. Maxwell looked frustrated now, like he was angry the words had escaped at all. They come in here acting like this place is a dating app. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Yes. They flirt with you constantly. I laughed nervously. Okay, first of all, no they don't. They do. And second of all, why do you care? There it was. The question. The real one. Maxwell looked away immediately, dragging a hand through his dark hair. I just do. That answer should not have affected me as much as it did. But something about Maxwell, this guy who barely showed emotion unless it was irritation, standing behind the garage looking genuinely bothered over me talking to customers. It hit hard. Too hard. You know, I said carefully, normal coworkers don't get possessive like this. I'm not possessive. You absolutely are. He exhaled sharply through his nose. Dean. No, seriously. I continued. You act like every person who talks to me is competing with you. His eyes snapped back to mine. Maybe they are. Everything inside me went completely still. The garage noises in the distance suddenly sounded muffled. Maxwell seemed to realize what he'd said a second too late. Because panic flashed across his face instantly. Tiny. Quick. But real. Then he stepped back like he needed physical distance from the conversation. I gotta get back to work. Maxwell. But he was already walking away. And the worst part? He looked terrified. Not of me. Of himself. That should have scared me. Instead, I spent the rest of the day unable to think about anything else. Especially not the way he looked at me when he said maybe they are. Like he meant it. Like he hadn't meant to admit it out loud. And like it was becoming impossible for him to hide anymore. After that conversation behind the garage, Maxwell avoided me. Not completely. Just enough to drive me insane. He still worked beside me. Still corrected me when I missed something. Still silently handed me tools before I asked for them. But now there was distance in everything he did. Like he'd accidentally crossed a line and was desperately trying to uncross it. Which would have been easier to ignore if I hadn't started noticing how attached I'd become to him too. The garage felt wrong whenever he disappeared into another bay. I caught myself looking for him constantly. One morning I walked in and didn't see his truck outside. Immediately, my stomach dropped. Rick noticed me scanning the garage. Relax, he said. Prince Charming's just late. I wasn't asking about Maxwell. You literally looked disappointed. From under a lifted SUV nearby, another mechanic yelled. They're fighting again. I'm not fighting with him. I snapped. Sure, Rick replied casually. That's why you look like your husband forgot your anniversary. The entire garage laughed. I hated how warm my face got instantly. And I hated even more that Maxwell walked in right at that moment. He stopped near the entrance, eyes immediately finding me like they always did. Then he looked around at everyone laughing. What? Rick grinned. Dean misses you when you're gone. Maxwell stared at him flatly. You're 50 years old. And you're blushing. That shut the whole garage up. Because Maxwell actually was blushing. Not dramatically. Just enough around the ears. His expression turned murderous instantly. Everybody shut the hell up. Then he walked straight past everyone and disappeared into the back of the shop. The second he was gone, Rick slowly turned toward me. Oh my God! What? That man is down catastrophic. I grabbed a rag and threw it at him. But the problem was, Rick wasn't wrong. Things only got worse after that. Because once I realized Maxwell liked me, really liked me, I started seeing evidence everywhere. The way he unconsciously moved closer whenever we talked. The way he remembered tiny things I mentioned once weeks earlier. The way his entire mood shifted depending on whether I was laughing or irritated. And worst of all, the way I started liking the jealousy. That part was deeply embarrassing. A few days later, Cheryl asked me to help at the front counter again while she dealt with inventory. Maxwell immediately looked suspicious. You're staying up there all day? It's literally part of the job. He frowned at the engine in front of him like it had personally offended him. You hate front desk work. I don't hate it. You complained about it yesterday. I complain about everything. That's fair. I grinned despite myself. And there it was again. That look. Maxwell staring at me too long before quickly glancing away. It happened so often now that I started wondering how nobody else noticed. Then again, maybe they did. Around noon, a customer around our age came in with a Jeep and immediately focused entirely on me. Can somebody help me? He asked, smiling. Yeah, I said. What's going on with the car? He leaned casually against the counter. Honestly? No clue. But now I'm less stressed. I rolled my eyes a little. You rehearsed that line? Maybe. From somewhere in the garage, something metallic slammed loudly. The customer jumped. I didn't even need to turn around. You should probably stop flirting with me, I said quietly. The guy laughed. Why? Your boyfriend works here? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because technically, no. But before I could answer, Maxwell appeared beside me like he'd been summoned by rage itself. What's the issue with the Jeep? The customer looked between us slowly. Then his eyebrows lifted. Oh no. He noticed. I could physically watch the realization happen in real time. The guy glanced at Maxwell. Then at me. Then back at Maxwell, staring at him like he wanted him dead. Right. The customer said carefully. Transmission's making a weird noise. I'll check it. The guy nodded immediately. Cool. Awesome. Great. Then he practically fled outside. I stared at Maxwell. You terrified him. He was annoying. He flirted with me for maybe 30 seconds. Maxwell grabbed the keys off the counter. Exactly. I followed him into the garage before I could stop myself. You know normal people don't react like this. Good thing I'm not normal. You're impossible. He stopped walking then. Turned toward me. Close enough that my brain immediately forgot what I was saying. You think this is funny? He asked quietly. I swallowed. A little. That guy was staring at you the entire time. So I hated it. The honesty in his voice hit me like a punch. Not angry honesty. Frustrated honesty. Like he was exhausted from trying not to feel whatever this was. You can't seriously get jealous every time somebody talks to me. His eyes locked onto mine. You want to know the worst part? What? I know it's irrational. That made my chest ache unexpectedly. Because suddenly Maxwell didn't look intimidating. He looked overwhelmed. I don't know how to stop doing it, he admitted quietly. The garage around us faded into background noise again. I stared at him for a second too long. And Maxwell noticed. His expression shifted instantly. Softer now. More careful. Dean, he said quietly. Nobody had ever said my name the way Maxwell did. Like it physically meant something to him. What? I asked, voice lower now. For one terrifying second, I thought he might actually say it. Whatever this thing between us was. Whatever he'd clearly been trying to hold back for weeks. But then Rick yelled across the garage again. Maxwell! Stop flirting and fix the damn Jeep! Maxwell immediately stepped back like he'd been caught doing something illegal. The mechanics nearby burst into laughter. I covered my face with one hand. This place is hell. Maxwell muttered something under his breath that definitely sounded like not helping. But even while he walked away, I caught him glancing back at me. And the expression on his face made one thing painfully obvious. He was trying very hard not to fall harder. The problem was, I already had. The thing about working in an auto shop is that everybody notices everything. Especially mechanics. You can't hide moods in a garage full of people who spend all day diagnosing problems from tiny noises. Which meant the entire shop realized something was happening between me and Maxwell long before either of us admitted it. Not openly, of course. But the comments got worse. Dean, your boyfriend's looking for you. Maxwell, quit staring before you burn through the engine. You two want to just get married and save us the suspense? Every single time, Maxwell reacted the same way. Immediate irritation. Immediate denial. Immediate blushing. Which honestly became my favorite part. Because Maxwell Mercer, the guy who acted emotionally unavailable to literally everyone, could rebuild a transmission blindfolded but apparently could not handle being teased about me for more than 3 seconds. One afternoon, Rick tossed me a wrench while Maxwell was underneath a lifted truck nearby. Careful, Rick said loudly. If Dean smiles at another customer today, Maxwell's gonna explode. A muffled voice from under the truck immediately snapped back. Shut up. The garage burst into laughter. I tried not to smile. Maxwell rolled himself out from under the truck just enough to glare directly at me. And somehow that glare made things worse. Because it wasn't really angry anymore. It was embarrassed. Which was infinitely more dangerous for my self-control. That same afternoon, Cheryl asked me to stay late helping close up paperwork at the front desk. Everybody else clocked out around 7. Including Maxwell. Or at least he pretended to. I was halfway through organizing invoices when I noticed him lingering near the tool cabinets, for absolutely no reason. You know your shift ended 20 minutes ago, right? He glanced over. Yeah. So why are you still here? Had stuff to finish. You've been reorganizing the same drawer for 10 minutes. I like organized drawers. I laughed quietly. Maxwell looked at me immediately. There was something different about being alone with him after hours. The garage felt bigger. Quieter. More intimate somehow. No mechanics yelling. No tools crashing. No Rick making inappropriate comments every 30 seconds. Just me and Maxwell standing under fluorescent lights pretending not to stare at each other. You don't have to babysit me, you know, I said eventually. I'm not babysitting you. You literally stayed late because I stayed late. No, I didn't. You absolutely did. He looked offended that I'd figured it out. Which basically confirmed it. I leaned back against the front counter, studying him. Why are you really still here? Maxwell opened his mouth. Closed it. Then sighed like he was annoyed with himself. I don't like leaving when you're here alone. The honesty hit me straight in the chest again. You think somebody's gonna kidnap me from the garage? No. Then what? He shrugged one shoulder awkwardly. He paused. I worry. That word did something dangerous to me. Because Maxwell didn't seem like someone who worried about anything. Except me. I looked down for a second before asking quietly. Why? Silence. Long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I care about you. Everything inside me stopped moving. Maxwell looked like he immediately regretted saying it out loud. Not because it wasn't true. Because now it existed between us openly. The garage suddenly felt too small. Too warm. You care about me, I repeated carefully. His jaw tightened. Dean! No, I just want to hear you say it again. His eyes snapped back to mine immediately. That look nearly ruined me. You know what I mean, he said quietly. I did. That was the problem. Because Maxwell wasn't looking at me like a coworker anymore. And honestly, I wasn't looking at him like one either. The silence stretched again. Neither of us moving. Neither of us looking away. Then the bell above the garage entrance rang suddenly. We both jumped apart like criminals. A guy walked in holding car keys and immediately frowned. You guys closed? Maxwell answered way too quickly. Yep. The customer looked confused. Then why are the lights closed? Maxwell repeated firmly. The guy slowly backed toward the door again. Okay. Damn. The second he left, I started laughing uncontrollably. Maxwell dragged both hands down his face. Oh my God! You just scared away an actual paying customer. He interrupted something. My laughter stopped instantly. Maxwell froze too. Either of us spoke. Because that sentence had not sounded accidental. At all. You mean interrupted paperwork? I asked carefully. Maxwell stared at me for one long second. Then he said quietly, No. That single word changed everything. The air between us felt electric now. Dangerously still. I took a slow step toward him before my brain could stop me. Maxwell watched me carefully but didn't move away. Maxwell, I said softly. His throat moved when he swallowed. Yeah? What exactly is happening between us? He looked genuinely tortured by the question. Like he'd been asking himself the same thing for weeks. Finally, he exhaled quietly. I think about you constantly. My heart immediately started hammering. I try not to, he continued. I seriously try. But every time somebody talks to you, or touches you, or makes you laugh. He shook his head once. It drives me insane. I couldn't breathe properly anymore. Why? His eyes met mine again. Completely unguarded this time. Because I want your attention all the time. The confession hung between us heavily. Raw. Honest. Terrifying. And Maxwell looked almost angry at himself for feeling it. You have it, I said before thinking. That got his full attention immediately. What? You have my attention. The expression on his face changed so fast it hurt to look at. Like hope physically scared him. Dean, he said quietly. Then he stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was giving me every chance to stop him. I didn't. And when his hand finally brushed against mine for the first time, the entire world seemed to go painfully still around us. Either of us spoke. Because suddenly this wasn't teasing anymore. Wasn't jokes from coworkers. Wasn't jealousy we could pretend meant nothing. This was real now. And judging by the way Maxwell looked at me in that empty garage, he was already completely gone. I barely slept after that night. Not because anything dramatic happened. That was the problem. Nothing happened. Maxwell touched my hand once in an empty garage, looked at me like I was the center of his entire nervous system, and then we both panicked and went home. Which somehow felt more intense than if we'd actually kissed. The next morning, I walked into Mercer Auto already exhausted. And immediately saw Maxwell standing near the coffee machine looking equally destroyed. Dark circles under his eyes. Jaw tense. Coffee cup held like it personally offended him. The second he noticed me, his entire posture changed. Tiny shift. But obvious. Like his body reacted to me before his brain could stop it. Morning, I said carefully. Morning. Silence. Rick looked between us immediately. Oh my God! He whispered dramatically to Cheryl. Something happened. Nothing happened. Maxwell and I said at the exact same time. That made things significantly worse. Rick pointed at us like he'd solved a murder case. Yep. They're in love. Maxwell looked ready to commit homicide. I grabbed a rag just to avoid making eye contact with anyone. But the real problem started around noon. Because Maxwell became unbearable. Not mean. Worse. Protective. A customer complained loudly at the front counter about pricing while I tried explaining the repair estimate. "I'm just saying," the guy snapped. "You mechanics always overcharge." Before I could answer, Maxwell appeared beside me instantly. "If you think you can do it cheaper yourself," he said flatly, "there's the door." The customer blinked. "I was talking to him." "I know. Maxwell," I warned quietly. But Maxwell was already fully irritated. "You don't talk to him like that." The customer stared between us slowly. Then something clicked behind his eyes. "Oh," he said. "Oh no." I knew that tone immediately. That was the tone of someone realizing something they definitely weren't supposed to realize. Maxwell noticed too. His entire body stiffened. The customer looked deeply entertained now. "You two together or something?" The garage went completely silent. Every mechanic within hearing distance immediately stopped moving. I could physically feel Rick trying not to laugh somewhere behind us. And Maxwell. Maxwell looked horrified. Not disgusted. Not angry. Terrified. Like someone had ripped a private thought directly out of his chest in public. The customer held his hands up quickly. "Hey, none of my business." Then he grabbed his invoice and escaped the building. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Finally, Rick whispered, "Well, this is the best day of my life." "Rick," Maxwell said warningly. "No, seriously," Rick continued. "That guy clocked you in like 2 seconds." Cheryl looked at me sympathetically. "You poor thing," she said softly. "What does that mean?" I asked immediately. "It means that man looks at you like a starving person staring through a bakery window." The entire garage lost it. Even Cheryl started laughing. Maxwell looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. "Everybody get back to work." But nobody listened because now the mechanics were openly arguing about how long Maxwell had been obviously obsessed with me. "I said it first." "No, I said it during the brake inspection thing." "Are we forgetting when he almost fought that dude with the Camaro?" I turned toward Maxwell slowly. "You almost fought somebody?" "He deserved it." "That is not an answer." Maxwell rubbed both hands over his face aggressively. "This place is a nightmare." "No," Rick corrected cheerfully. "This place is a romance." Maxwell immediately walked away into the back garage. I watched him go. And suddenly the teasing wasn't funny anymore. Because underneath all the embarrassment, I'd seen the look on Maxwell's face when that customer asked if we were together. Fear. Real fear. That realization sat heavily in my chest for the rest of the day. Around closing time, I found him outside again behind the garage. Same spot as before. Same cigarette. Same exhausted expression. "You know, smoking every time you panic is a terrible coping mechanism." He glanced at me tiredly. "You following me now? Somebody has to supervise your emotional breakdowns." That actually got a small laugh out of him. Then silence settled again. I leaned beside him against the brick wall. "You okay?" "No." The honesty surprised me. Maxwell stared out toward the parking lot, jaw tight. "I hate people knowing things before I'm ready." My chest tightened immediately. "You mean about me?" He nodded once. Very small. I looked down at my hands for a second before speaking carefully. "Does it bother you that much?" "No," he answered too fast. Then sighed. "That's the problem." I turned toward him fully now. Maxwell looked conflicted in a way I'd never seen before. "I've never." He stopped himself. Tried again. "I don't usually feel things this intensely." That sentence nearly destroyed me. "You think I don't notice?" He continued quietly. "I notice every time somebody flirts with you. Every time you smile at someone else. It's insane." "Maxwell. And I know it's obvious now," he muttered. "Everybody at the shop knows. Hell, customers know." I smiled a little despite myself. "That guy today figured it out in like 5 seconds. That's not helping." But he wasn't wrong. Maxwell finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. "You saying that because you're being nice?" he said quietly. Or because you mean it? There it was. The real question. The dangerous one. I stepped closer before I could overthink it. Close enough that his cigarette smoke mixed with the smell of motor oil and laundry detergent, and somehow just smelled like Maxwell now. I mean it. His breathing changed instantly. You have any idea, he said softly, what you do to me? My pulse jumped hard. Probably the same thing you do to me. That broke him a little. I saw it happen in real time. The walls. The restraint. The constant fighting with himself. Gone for one single second. Maxwell looked at me with an expression so openly overwhelmed it made my chest ache. Then, quietly, Dean. Nobody had ever said my name like a confession before. And when he reached for my hand this time, he didn't let go. After Maxwell grabbed my hand behind the garage, things changed immediately. Not officially. Not in a, we sat down and discussed our feelings like emotionally mature adults kind of way. But the shift was impossible to ignore. Because once Maxwell stopped pretending he didn't want me, he became completely incapable of hiding it. And honestly, that should have worried me more than it did. The next morning, I walked into the garage and immediately felt his eyes on me. I hadn't even clocked in yet. Maxwell was across the shop working on an Audi, but the second I stepped through the door, his head lifted automatically. Like some invisible thread connected us now. Rick noticed instantly. Oh, this is disgusting already. Good morning to you too, I muttered. Rick pointed dramatically across the garage. Look at him. I looked. Bad decision. Because Maxwell was still staring. Not subtle. Not casual. Just openly watching me now like he'd forgotten other people existed. The second our eyes met, his expression softened automatically. That nearly killed me on the spot. Rick made a fake vomiting noise. Yeah, okay. You're both done for. Maxwell finally looked away, visibly irritated that he'd been caught. But 10 minutes later he was suddenly beside me anyway. You ate breakfast? I blinked at him. What? You skipped yesterday. How do you know that? You got dizzy around 4. I stared at him slowly. You noticed that. You almost dropped a tire. That's not the point. Maxwell looked genuinely confused why this was surprising. Of course he noticed. Apparently he noticed everything about me. That realization followed me around all day. The way Maxwell automatically handed me tools before I asked for them. The way he kept drifting physically closer whenever we worked together. The way his mood improved immediately anytime I laughed. It would have been subtle if I didn't know him so well now. But I did. And once you understood Maxwell, you realized how huge these tiny things actually were. Around lunchtime, things got worse. Because Cheryl cornered me near the vending machines with the expression of someone about to start drama intentionally. So, she said casually. No. You and Maxwell. No. You're holding hands behind the garage. I nearly choked on my drink. Rick talks too much. Rick sees too much. I rubbed a hand over my face. It's complicated. Cheryl looked delighted. Complicated is my favorite kind. Before I could answer, Maxwell appeared beside me out of nowhere. Literally out of nowhere. You done interrogating him? Cheryl grinned slowly. Oh my God! He really does hover. I do not hover. You appeared in under 10 seconds. I was walking past. You were in Bay 3. Maxwell looked annoyed that she'd apparently tracked his movements. I laughed quietly before I could stop myself. His eyes immediately flicked toward me. And there it was again. That look. Every single time I laughed. Like he couldn't help reacting to me. Cheryl saw it too. Her entire expression softened unexpectedly. Then she looked at Maxwell and said very gently, You know you're allowed to relax, right? The garage suddenly felt quieter somehow. Maxwell's face changed instantly. Small shift. But real. Like that sentence hit somewhere deeper than she intended. I'm relaxed, he muttered. Cheryl snorted and walked away. She scares me, Maxwell admitted quietly. That's because she understands human emotions. Sounds fake. I smiled. Maxwell stared at me again. God, he really couldn't stop doing that now. You're staring, I pointed out softly. I know. The honesty in that answer made my stomach flip embarrassingly hard. You gonna keep doing it? Probably. Then, before I could recover from that response, he leaned slightly closer and lowered his voice. You're wearing that cologne again. My brain completely short-circuited. What? The one from Friday. You know my cologne? His expression immediately shifted into regret. Too late. I stared at him in disbelief. Maxwell. He looked away instantly. Oh my God! It's not weird. It is absolutely weird. You smell good, he muttered defensively. I laughed so hard I had to lean against the vending machine. And Maxwell? Maxwell looked completely helpless watching me laugh. Like he'd say almost anything if it kept happening. That realization settled warmly in my chest for the rest of the afternoon. Until closing time. Because closing time was dangerous now. Everybody else eventually clocked out, leaving the garage quieter and darker than usual, while Maxwell and I finished cleaning tools in the back. The radio played softly somewhere near the office. Outside, rain tapped against the garage doors. And Maxwell kept looking at me like he was trying not to lose his mind. Finally, I set down the rag in my hands. Okay. He glanced over immediately. Okay, what? You need to stop looking at me like that. What way? That way. Helpful explanation. Great job, Dean. Maxwell's mouth twitched slightly. You gonna elaborate? I stepped closer before my courage disappeared. You look at me like you're trying very hard not to do something. His expression changed instantly. The teasing disappeared. Now he just looked honest. Maybe I am. The air between us felt heavy immediately. I swallowed hard. What thing? For a second, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then Maxwell took one slow step closer to. Close enough that I could see grease stains still faintly marking his hands. Close enough that his voice dropped lower automatically. You really don't know? My heart was beating ridiculously hard now. I think I want to hear you say it. That visibly affected him. His jaw tightened. Eyes locked onto mine. Dean, he said quietly, I've been trying not to kiss you for like 3 weeks. Every thought left my brain instantly. Oh. Very intelligent response. Maxwell actually smiled a little then. Soft. Nervous. Real. Yeah, he murmured. The rain outside sounded louder somehow. Neither of us moved. Neither of us looked away. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for days. What's stopping you? The smile disappeared immediately. Not because he didn't want to. Because he wanted to too much. You sure you want to know? Yes. Maxwell exhaled slowly. Because if I start, he admitted quietly, I don't think I'm stopping anytime soon. That sentence hit me so hard I physically forgot how to breathe for a second. And judging by the way Maxwell looked at me afterward, he knew exactly what he'd done. I spent the entire night replaying Maxwell's voice in my head. Because if I start, I don't think I'm stopping anytime soon was an insane thing to say to somebody, and then just casually leave hanging in the air. Especially when you're standing 2 feet apart in a dark garage while rain hits the windows like background music in a movie. The worst part? He looked genuinely terrified after saying it. Not because he didn't mean it. Because he absolutely did. That moment could have gone very differently if Rick hadn't suddenly pounded on the office window from outside. Both of us jumped apart instantly. Rick stood under an umbrella grinning like a psychopath. You idiots done making hard eyes at each other? Maxwell closed his eyes briefly like he was asking the universe for patience. You forgot your phone, Rick yelled through the glass. I hate this place, Maxwell muttered. I laughed nervously, mostly because otherwise I might have combusted. And just like that, the moment shattered. But not completely. Because after Rick left, the tension didn't disappear. If anything, it got worse. Maxwell looked at me for one long second before grabbing his jacket. I should go. Probably true. Neither of us moved. Then he added quietly, Dean. The way he said my name again nearly ruined me. Yeah? His eyes flicked briefly toward my mouth before snapping back up. I meant what I said. Then he walked out into the rain before I could respond. And that was somehow even more devastating than if he'd kissed me. The next few days became unbearable. Not bad unbearable. Worse. Mutual pining unbearable. Because now we both knew exactly what was happening, but neither of us seemed capable of actually crossing the final line. Which turned Maxwell into an absolute disaster. He hovered constantly. Touched me accidentally on purpose. Looked at me like he was fighting demons every 5 minutes. And the entire garage noticed. Again. On Thursday morning, I reached past him for a socket wrench at the exact same moment he turned toward me. We bumped into each other lightly. Nothing dramatic. But Maxwell froze instantly. Completely froze. Like casual contact suddenly required a full system reboot. I stared at him. He stared back. Rick walked past us carrying tires and sighed dramatically. Just kiss already? I'm tired. Maxwell immediately stepped backwards so fast he nearly hit a toolbox. I covered my face with one hand. This place is cursed. No, Cheryl corrected from the front desk. This place is incredibly entertaining. Maxwell looked deeply betrayed by all of humanity. But later that afternoon, things shifted again. Because a customer made the mistake of touching me. Not in a creepy way. Just friendly. A guy around our age brought his truck in and lightly grabbed my shoulder while laughing about something I said. Normal interaction. Except Maxwell saw it happen from across the garage. And oh, that was bad. His entire expression darkened instantly. Not cartoon jealousy. Something quieter. Sharper. The customer didn't notice, but I did immediately. And suddenly Maxwell was crossing the garage toward us with the exact energy of somebody trying very hard to behave normally and failing. You done up here? He asked me flatly. The customer glanced between us. We were just talking. I can see that. I nearly kicked Maxwell directly in the shin. The customer looked deeply confused now. Then slowly amused. Oh, he said quietly. Not again. I could physically feel Maxwell realizing what expression he currently had on his face. Because he immediately looked away. Too late. The customer grinned slightly. You his boyfriend or his bodyguard? I actually choked. Maxwell looked like his soul left his body. And neither. I answered way too quickly. The customer's grin widened. Right. Then he handed me his keys and walked away looking extremely entertained. The second he disappeared into the waiting room, I turned toward Maxwell. You need to relax? I am relaxed? You looked ready to kill him. He touched you. That is such an insane sentence. Maxwell rubbed a hand over his jaw aggressively. You think I don't know that? I stared at him for a second. Then, carefully. You really get jealous that easily? His eyes snapped toward mine immediately. You really have to ask? The honesty in his voice hit hard again. God. Maxwell didn't know how to hide anything anymore. I lowered my voice slightly. You know I'm not interested in those guys, right? That visibly affected him. Tiny shift. But immediate. Yeah? Yes. Silence stretched between us. The garage noises blurred softly in the background again. Maxwell stepped closer. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me to notice. You have any idea? He asked quietly. How hard this has been? What part? Wanting you this much and still trying to act normal. My pulse jumped hard. Maxwell. No, seriously. He interrupted softly. You smile at me and I forget what I'm doing. You talk to customers and I lose my mind. He laughed once under his breath. Rick's right. I'm a disaster. The fact that Maxwell Mercer, this intimidating mechanic who barely tolerated anybody, looked genuinely overwhelmed by his feelings for me did dangerous things to my emotional stability. "You know what the worst part is?" he continued. "What?" "I think everybody figured it out before I did." I smiled helplessly. "That's probably true." His expression softened instantly, seeing me smile again. There it was. Every single time. Like he physically couldn't help it. And suddenly, right there in the middle of the garage, surrounded by engines and fluorescent lights and the smell of oil, I realized Maxwell was looking at me like someone who'd already fallen completely in love. The terrifying part? I was pretty sure I looked at him the exact same way. By Friday, the entire garage had turned into a hostage situation. Not because anything bad happened. Because everyone was waiting for me and Maxwell to finally do something about whatever the hell this was. Even Rick stopped making jokes every 5 minutes and started looking genuinely frustrated. "You two are exhausting," he announced while changing brake pads that morning. Maxwell didn't even look up. "Nobody asked you." "I'm serious. This has become emotionally stressful for me personally." Cheryl nodded from the front office. "The tension in this building could power a small city." I tried ignoring all of them. Mostly because they weren't wrong. Things between me and Maxwell had become unbearable in the quietest possible way. Nothing official had happened. No kiss. No conversation defining anything. But emotionally? We were already gone. And everybody knew it. Especially me. Because Maxwell had stopped hiding how attached he was completely. He looked for me constantly now. If I disappeared into another bay too long, suddenly he'd magically need something nearby. If another mechanic started talking to me, Maxwell's attention immediately shifted. If I laughed? Forget it. That man reacted to my laugh like it personally kept him alive. Around lunch, Rick finally snapped. Maxwell was under a lifted truck while I worked beside him organizing tools when a customer walked past and smiled at me. Completely harmless. "Hey Dean," the guy said casually. "You the one who helped me last month?" "Yeah," I replied. "Truck running okay now?" "Perfect actually." The guy kept talking for maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds. And when he finally walked away, Rick slowly looked toward the underside of the truck where Maxwell had gone completely silent. "You good under there, Romeo?" No answer. Then Maxwell rolled himself out from under the truck looking visibly irritated. "I'm fine. You looked one missed heartbeat away from homicide. He talks to Dean too much." I covered my face with one hand immediately. Because Maxwell had said that out loud. In front of everybody. The entire garage exploded. Rick physically dropped a wrench laughing. Cheryl leaned out of the office like she just heard breaking celebrity gossip. "Oh my God!" she wheezed. Maxwell realized what he'd admitted about half a second too late. His eyes widened slightly. Then he looked directly at me. And the expression on his face. Pure horror. Not because he felt it. Because it escaped publicly. I should have saved him. Instead, I started laughing too. Not mean laughter. Fond laughter. Because Maxwell looked so genuinely betrayed by his own emotions that it became impossible not to. "You think this is funny?" he asked me flatly. "A little. That guy was flirting with you. He was thanking me for fixing his truck. He smiled too much." The garage lost it again. Rick actually had to sit down. Meanwhile, Maxwell stared at me like he wanted everyone else to disappear so he could continue arguing privately. That realization hit me hard. Because suddenly I understood something important. Maxwell didn't just want my attention. He wanted all of it. The rest of the day passed in this weird charged haze where Maxwell became increasingly impossible to ignore. He touched my shoulder while squeezing past me. Adjusted my gloves for me without thinking. Handed me coffee halfway through the afternoon because apparently he noticed I was tired before I did. Nobody else got this version of him. That part wrecked me quietly. Around closing time, a storm rolled in hard enough that Rick finally threw his hands up. "Everybody go home before the roof collapses." One by one, the mechanics left. Soon the garage was nearly empty except for me and Maxwell finishing paperwork near the office while thunder rattled the windows outside. The rain sounded loud against the metal roof. For a while neither of us spoke. Then Maxwell said quietly, "You laughed at me today." I glanced over. "You admitted jealousy in front of the entire shop. You enjoyed that way too much." "Maybe." His mouth twitched slightly. Then silence settled again. Comfortable this time. Dangerously comfortable. I watched rain slide down the garage windows while Maxwell flipped through invoices beside me, looking exhausted and beautiful and unfairly distracting. Finally, before I could overthink it, I asked, "Why me?" He looked up immediately. "What? You could have anybody," I said softly. "So why are you acting like this over me?" The question affected him instantly. His entire expression shifted. Like he couldn't believe I genuinely didn't know. "Dean," he said quietly, "you really have no idea what you're like." My heartbeat picked up immediately. "What's that supposed to mean?" He set the paperwork down slowly. Then stood. And before my brain could catch up, Maxwell walked toward me with that same careful look he always got when emotion started winning against self-control. "You walk into a room," he said quietly, "and suddenly I can't focus on anything else. I forgot how to breathe properly. You smile at people and I get irrationally angry." He shook his head once, almost embarrassed. "You laugh at my stupid jokes even when they're terrible. They are pretty terrible. That's not the point." I smiled helplessly. Maxwell looked visibly affected by that smile again. "God. You make this place feel different," he admitted softly. "Better." That sentence hit somewhere deep in my chest. The rain outside sounded deafening now. Neither of us looked away. Then Maxwell stepped closer again. Close enough that my pulse immediately lost all stability. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked quietly. "What?" "I tried really hard not to fall for you. My heart physically hurt. And?" His eyes searched mine carefully. "Didn't work. That was it. That was the moment. Because suddenly the distance between us felt ridiculous. Temporary. Pointless. I took one slow step closer too. Maxwell's breathing changed immediately. "Dean," he said softly, almost warningly. But I was done pretending not to understand this thing between us. Done pretending his jealousy didn't affect me. Done pretending his attention didn't ruin me. Done pretending I didn't want him exactly as badly as he wanted me. So I reached for his hand first this time. And Maxwell looked at me like that single gesture meant everything.